True or false? Cortisol is the devil.
False. Again, justice for cortisol.
Justice for cortisol. I'm Laurel Beversdorf, strength and conditioning coach.
And I'm Dr. Sarah Court, physical therapist.
With over 30 years of combined experience in fitness, movement, and physical therapy,
We believe in strong opinions, loosely held.
which means we're not here to hype outdated movement concepts.
Or to gatekeep or fearmonger strength training for women.
For too long, women have been sidelined in strength training.
Oh, you mean handed pink dumbbells and told to sculpt?
Whatever that means, we're here to change that with tools, evidence, and ideas that center women's needs and voices.
Let's dive in.
Welcome to Season 7 of the Movement Logic Podcast. I'm Laurel Beversdorf, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Sarah Court.
Hello.
Hello! We are recording before the season. We are not in Season 7. So 3-ish months from now, we will be airing this episode. And we have a very special guest for you today. She is an expert in female physiology. We will officially introduce her soon. Before we do that, let's talk about our lives. Sarah, what is going on?
I wrote a note in our combined notes. I wrote Sarah's surprise banter. And then I wrote, let's hope she can fucking remember. Because
It's just antagonizing yourself.
I forget a lot of stuff. And I also only actually remembered what this was. Like I pulled this document open a couple hours ago and I looked at it and I was like, oh shit, I don't remember. Like I really don't remember what this was about.
Why didn't you just write it in the document?
I didn't write it in the document because I didn't want you to see it ahead of time. I wanted you to have like an honest in the moment reaction.
Remember that time
So-
you told me not to read the outline because you're like, don't read the outline because it's got to be a secret. Otherwise it
Yeah.
won't work. And I went immediately and read the outline.
Yeah, I've learned that's not a strategy that works with Laurel. So I just have to rely on my memory, which is maybe an even worse strategy because it's like a piece of tissue paper that you can blow on and it falls apart. Like there's really nothing there. But luckily, just a few minutes ago, I did remember what it was. I had written to myself, hint, it's about both of us being yoga teachers. And at first reading that hint did nothing for me.
That could be a lot of stories.
Exactly. And like, that's not enough in detail, but I remember what it is, which is
Okay.
this. When you were a yoga teacher, were you trained to do what sort of colloquially became known as a Dharma talk
Oh,
at the
God.
beginning of
I'm
your
glad
classes?
you asked. I'm glad
Yeah.
you asked because originally when I was very new to yoga as a student would love them. And then as I learned more about yoga, I would go to the same classes, the same teachers, and they would start their Dharma talk and I'd be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It was so deep when I was new to yoga. And then it was like
Right.
so like word salady later.
Right.
Although there are some teachers who can give a damn good Dharma talk. I'm sure you were
Yeah.
one of them. I've never heard
thanks.
your Dharma talks before, but like Joe Miller. I don't know if you know who Joe Miller is.
Joe Miller? Not Jill Miller.
Joe.
I don't know.
Yeah,
who
Joe Miller.
is.
I taught in Costa Rica with him. We did the
Mm.
anatomy portion of a 200-hour teacher training together. That guy can give a great Dharma talk.
Nice.
It's very authentic and it's very intelligent and it makes sense. But there were lots of teachers where I just felt like they were putting sentences together, didn't really go together, but sounded spiritual.
Sure.
So then I started teaching yoga, and I was not told that I should give a Dharma talk, but some of my teacher trainers gave Dharma talks, and then others just completely avoided them. And they were like, listen, if it's coming from an authentic place where you have something to say that makes sense and is tied to the practice somehow, go for it.
Right.
And I started to notice that the popular teachers gave Dharma talks. And so then I tried to give Dharma talks, and it was so bad. It felt bad. It probably sounded bad. And I was like, okay, enough of that. I'm not doing Dharma talks anymore. I would weave in like stuff that was not completely related to movement in the class. And there was a sense of humor and there was a connection to real life, but it was just not this speech at the beginning.
Right.
And I also feel like it's very difficult for me to sit down and not move and then say something smart.
Right.
I need to actually be moving my body. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was so much about the way that it suggested to me that I should play the role of a yoga teacher that immediately crushed anything insightful that I had to say. If I would
Right.
just literally stop trying to be a yoga teacher and just be myself, I had plenty of things to say.
Yeah, I wanted to know that because I had a thought the other night, late night thoughts. And I was thinking about this podcast. And because I did do Dharma talks, I trained as a Jivamukti teacher. The Dharma talk, they never called it that. That's just sort of what colloquially it became known as. But they would have sort of a topic per month. It would be ahimsa, non-harming or something. And so everyone's talk had to be sort of around that theme. So that was always very helpful because it gave you a container of a subject as opposed to like, just talk about something. And then you're like, well, what?
Yeah.
But what I was thinking the other night was having this podcast in some ways is, for me at least, a way to keep doing the Dharma talk. But the Dharma talk is not religious now. It's science, And so because there's not really an opportunity in my day-to-day. I'm working one-on-one with patients generally. I'm not teaching group classes. I'm not teaching yoga classes. I'm not getting to talk about these things in a bigger conceptual way very much. So I think that's part of what I love about getting to record and also getting to record with you, because I definitely feel like you make me smarter. Like that. No, for sure. Laurel doesn't let me get away with anything. So anytime I say something remotely iffy, she's like, huh? And I'm like, oh God, you're right. But hang on, I got to go back and look at that. I can't just like slide through. But it does. It ends up making me smarter. So I appreciate that. I appreciate having a place where we get to really talk about stuff that matters.
Oh, thank you for sharing
You're
that. I'm
welcome.
going to say you also are an amazing editor for my rambling, where you will very gently go, Laurel, let's stay on topic. Can we get to the point? But you do it in such a nice way where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing that thing where I go down a rabbit hole and forget that there are people listening to me because I'm just talking. I'm saying my thoughts out loud.
But your rabbit holes are always interesting and they're related and I think valuable. But then sometimes we just do need to like kind of let's just put the train back on the tracks.
And I cannot thank you enough for that.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure.
I would be a derailed train a lot without you.
Laurel, who are we talking to today?
Oh, we have a great episode. We have a great episode with Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple for you today. Lauren is a muscle physiology researcher and science communicator with a PhD in integrative physiology from McMaster University and an MS in exercise science from the University of South Florida. Her work focuses on the influence of ovarian hormones on exercise-induced adaptations. She's also an expert fitness professional with years of practical experience in strength and conditioning and sports nutrition. And she is co-owner of the Mass Research Review.
She also has a fantastic Instagram account. Like if you are not following her, you want to stop what you're doing and follow her. It's at Dr. Lauren CS1, where she blasts through just myths and misunderstandings around women's exercise, nutrition, supplements, and more. She's also co-host of our new favorite podcast, Front Page Fitness, with Dr. Eric Trexler. It's hilarious. And he basically gives her a hard time about everything. It's really entertaining.
Yeah, they have great banter.
We had a great conversation with her, and we hope you enjoy it. Before we get to it, please rate, review, and subscribe to the Movement Logic podcast so that you never miss an episode and so that the robot overlords get our message to more people.
Or if that all sounds like jargon, you could just share this episode with a friend.
Fair enough.
That's good enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Forward it to a friend. All right, let's hear from Dr. Colenso-Semple. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the Movement Logic podcast. We are both big fans of your work, your approach to cutting through the noise around women's exercise and fitness to get to what the evidence actually tells us. We want to talk to you today about a slew of fact-adjacent myths that we think we're seeing all the time on social media that seem to be, I think, an unnecessary, perhaps unnecessary overcomplication of women's health and fitness, in particular for women in peri or post-menopause, the menopause industrial complex, as it were.
Yes. And as much as we tried not to make the claims all come from one source, as it turns out, a lot of them do. Either original claims by this one person or something that she also agrees with. Now, Before we start naming names, we have seen a reluctance in other podcasts or on social media to name this person. And when we've inquired more closely, we've heard about threatening DMs from her cult fans, or sidestepping naming names by claiming that they're more interested in data than calling out people. But here at Movement Logic, we are interested in both data and calling out people. So we are going to risk the wrath of her followers and name the source for a lot of the claims we're going to be talking about today. And that is exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist, Dr. Stacy Sims. So before we get started, I just want to ask, having named Dr. Sims, are you now frightened that someone's going to leave a horse's head on your pillow?
They've already come for me, so I'm no stranger to the hate.
Okay.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I've been following your podcast, Front Page Fitness, religiously. Speaking of cults, no, I'm just kidding. Dear leader. No, I've been following your podcast and hearing about the blowback you're receiving. And then I go to your threads and I'm like, she's just responding with the facts.
Yeah.
She basically
data.
just told this person what's in the study and they're really mad at her. I'm like, wow. Okay. Well, like Sarah said, we tried to find myths that weren't related to Stacy Sims, and we found it was pretty difficult. So we're now calling her patient zero for a lot of the claims that are being bandied about on the internet. And we actually feel that we have a responsibility to name names in this case, especially when someone is as credentialed as she is, putting messages out there because it's often really difficult to believe or know what to do when a clinician or a scientist is putting out incorrect or misleading information. So let's get to it. We have collected claims from Sims' recent guest spots on the Huberman Lab podcast and Mel Robbins podcasts and distilled them down to what seem to be her core claims. We've also included some more generalized questions on prevailing trends in exercise for women.
Okay, so let's start with the big one, which is the "women are not small men" phrase, which Sims has coined and also has registered, I noticed because I went to her website, that has become a rallying cry for women in health and fitness, right? Women are not small men. Personally, I'm 6 feet and 175 pounds, so I'm actually larger than some men. But anyway, while sex differences certainly exist, how do we know which physiological differences are meaningful enough to warrant different exercise or nutrition strategies, especially when we know that there's not as much research on women as there's been on men?
Yeah, so to start, I'll just say the reason I feel it's important to directly address the messenger as well as the messages. People are confused, and it does harm when you overcomplicate fitness and nutrition and weight loss. And that is really troubling to me. And what I've seen, or over the past few months is a lot of women just sort of throwing their hands up and walking away from fitness altogether because they don't know who to believe and they're so confused and it sounds so complicated. And so I think that it's important when somebody who has the credentials and comes off sounding like such an authority figure, we as scientists have a responsibility to back up what we say with data. And responsible scientists will always acknowledge what we don't know, the nuance, the differences between individuals, which we always see with exercise and nutrition studies. And there's none of that happening here. And I think the issue with the "women are not small men" and kind of making that the brand identity is that when data comes out to show, hey, you know what, we're actually pretty similar in this way. The fat loss works pretty similar. The exercise-induced adaptations would pretty much need to do the same things. That kind of breaks apart the brand. And so, unfortunately, by really rooting everything around this claim, there's a lack of willingness to acknowledge the similarities. And a lot of the claim is also really tied to this message that we have no data in women, nothing. It's all in men. And so therefore, here's a wild claim that, you need to do something completely different. But we have a lot of data in women. And certainly over the past 10, 15 years, scientists have replicated many studies that were initially conducted in men on different exercise variables, on different nutritional strategies. And more and more and more, we see that while the hypothesis was reasonable, that there might be sex differences, the outcomes don't really reflect those differences. And so I believe we need to consider, from a practical perspective, the individual, and understand that there's not going to be a one size fits all program for anyone, but that's because we have different goals and different priorities and different backgrounds, and that's fine. But that has nothing to do with the fact that I am a woman and you are a man. That's just good coaching and acknowledging of our inter-individual differences.
Can I ask a follow-up question based on what you said? So you're saying that there is quite a bit of research that's been done on women. Would you say that it's vastly less than what's been done on men, close to what's been done on men, or how does it compare? And does it matter that it's a different amount? In other words, are you suggesting that there's actually been enough to sort of call into question this idea that women are physiologically so much more different than men that things need to be, applied to them quite a bit differently, I guess is what I'm asking. Like, I think that the way that Stacy Sims operates, which I think is a way that a lot of people like her, who I think misuse their platform and their credentials operate, is it's a lot of two truths and a lie. Like, is it true that there's less research on women, but does that therefore mean that women are not small men in the sense that, like, we need to just totally do things differently?
Yeah, so there's really two things here. One, there is truth that, if we look at the literature as a whole, there, especially in younger women or in perimenopausal women, we don't have as much data. We do have quite a lot in post-menopausal older women, and we're getting more and more in women of all ages. But if we are to say there's no study in women on that particular question, the answer isn't. And therefore, I'm going to look at potential mechanistic data or rodent data and craft a recommendation that is going to instruct you to drastically change your behavior. The answer is to actually do the research in women.
Got it.
And when we think about exercise in general, we do have plenty of exercise studies in women. We have plenty of nutrition studies in women, to the point that what we see when they are replicated is that, there aren't drastic differences in the efficacy of these strategies. And what that says to me is, if there is a scenario where, okay, we don't have that replicated in women yet, I'm very comfortable relying on the studies that were conducted in men, at least as a starting point.
Right. And you're suggesting that Sims oftentimes uses studies done on rodents or studies done on animals that are not human to sort of support some of her claims?
That's right. I mean, honestly, there are some claims that I honestly can't tell you where they came from. I've tried to even find a source, and I just cannot. But I have really investigated the claims because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something. And so it wasn't that I was trying to kind of go after this person. I was saying, this is interesting because in the scientific community, in the fitness community, you're the only person saying these things, and these are meaningful recommendations, very, very different. And so I wanted to understand where they came from. And what I found time and time again is the kind of kernel of truth comes from rodent data.
Got it.
And then perhaps it's referenced in a narrative review, which is sort of a literature review, kind of an opinion paper that would discuss a topic and the state of the science on a topic. And you can reference whatever you want. So perhaps the title of that narrative review is something that doesn't allude to rodent research, but when you actually look at the references when it comes to those claims, they are rodent studies.
I sort of have a related follow-up question, which is we know that Sims has done a ton of her own research. She's published something like over 100 papers. Have you had the opportunity to look at her work, and is that where she is generating some of her claims that are not held up by other current research?
I'm not aware of her doing any research recently in recent years. She has published review papers, like I mentioned, which are not clinical trials. So there is no intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And it would basically be, I can get together with some colleagues and we might pitch a journal. Hey, can we write about women and fasting? And the journal would say, sure. Or maybe the journal would come to us and say, hey, are you interested in writing a review about protein in older adults? And then we do that. And so it is a good way to kind of beef up your publications. It's designed to say, here are some gaps in the literature, and now we should all prioritize these as our future research projects. It shouldn't be used to sort of craft your own narrative or push any sort of agenda. That's not the purpose. So while I know that when she did research, she did some kind of hydration work in women, I believe, but in modern day, people say, oh, she's doing her own research and she's publishing it on her website. If you're doing your own research and it's research,
Laurel, we should start doing our own research and publishing it on our website.
Where have we heard that? I did my own research.
Yeah. Also, I didn't know it was that easy. You just publish it on your own website, and then you're a published author. Shoot,
you can publish hundreds of papers a year, I guess. If
I guess so. I've been doing it wrong.
So, I mean, to be clear, doing research, conducting a clinical trial from design to participant recruitment to data collection to data analysis, these trials take 1 to 3+ years just to do one study. Yeah. And so the idea that anyone would be presenting something as research, or that people would be misinterpreting it as research when it's not actually published in a peer-reviewed journal is a huge problem.
I'm glad you asked that question, Sarah, because I was unaware. Okay. All right. So data suggests that women start to lose muscle as soon as age 30. Is this true? Is it true for women only, or does this happen to men too? Do women start to lose muscle at a different age than 30? What say you?
The data on this is basically looking at groups of people in their 20s, groups of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then trying to model, right? So it's not following you over time and measuring you every decade of life. We don't have that data. And it's a really, really hard study. And so when we try to answer questions like that, then this is what the starting point to get a large enough data set to say, okay, let's look at these people in this decade of life, and then these people in that decade of life, and let's do a comparison and then try to model what's going on. So that's where that 30, some people will say 40. It depends on how you kind of structure that model, but that's where it comes from. And it's similar in men and women.
Wow.
These studies don't take into account physical activity. And so it's not surprising that we would see, this rate of muscle loss as we are, increasingly sedentary for most of our adult life and increasing into old age. But We see muscle loss really start to accelerate in the 70s and 80s. That's when we have the biggest decline. And it appears to be a function of aging coupled with physical inactivity.
So what I'm hearing is that data suggest that women and men start to lose muscle as soon as age 30, but that it might be less related to anabolic resistance as it is related to lifestyle of just becoming more sedentary. Did I get that right?
So it's hard to say exactly why,
Okay.
right? Because we can say, is it aging? Is it anabolic resistance? Well, they're both sort of happening at the same time. And that's why when people say, oh, it's menopause, and then you try to tease out menopause from aging, well, you can't really do that because menopause and aging are happening at the same time. But one thing we can do is look at the menopause transition and the years before and after. And then, if it's menopause, right, we should see some dramatic shift during that transition. And if we don't, then it's probably more of an age-related factor. And then if we see, oh, men are following a similar trajectory, then that's another indication that okay, it's probably an age-related factor.
Got it.
But all this to say is, if you are resistance training, then that is how you can preserve and continue to build muscle mass regardless of how old you are.
And regardless of sex.
Correct.
Yeah.
Cool.
And there's a push that we're seeing to get women over 35 to start lifting heavier weights and to shift away from the sort of like high rep, low load workouts that are typically marketed to women because, women should want to, quote unquote, tone or sculpt or don't get too bulky, all these words that make me throw up in my mouth a little bit. What does the evidence suggest about how training priorities should change for women as they age?
They don't change. It's more a function of people not engaging in them at all, or not. I mean, this isn't from a scientific perspective. This is more of just my personal opinion. But what I see is a lot of women don't have a consistent exercise routine and don't have a progressive program. And so, we'll do this group fitness class on Monday and that group fitness class on Tuesday, or get really into Pilates for a couple months and then get really into cycling for another couple months. And then ultimately you're healthy, your exercise is good, but then everyone who has these body composition goals is feeling like, oh, I'm just spinning my wheels, even though I'm always going to the gym, but I'm not really changing the way that I look. And that is because you're not engaging in a resistance training program that is sufficiently challenging and progressive in nature.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always, kind of an aside, I always find it very contradictory. Well, no, I always find it seems very bizarre that, people like Sims who have these very seemingly hyper-specific protocols that they're suggesting for people around exercise are like making almost like it's like assumed in their advice giving that like most people are already exercising when like the vast majority of people aren't. And so then I'm like, well, who are you even talking to? Like, are you just like talking to yourself right now or like to the, five people that are currently doing any exercise at all that are listening? Like, Okay, so Sims recommends that. So speaking of hyper-specific advice, right? Sims recommends that younger women train to failure. And I think that on the Huberman Lab podcast, they defined younger women as like age 20 to 30. Okay, so younger women train to failure, while older women, so that I think was like 40 plus, age 40 plus, should lift heavier and avoid failure. I think I know what you're going to say, but is there research supporting age-specific hypertrophy or strength protocols in women or anyone?
No, we have a lot of data looking at different rep ranges in younger men, younger women, older women, middle-aged men and women. So everybody. And we see, because this is actually something that the scientific community changed their mind about over let's say 20 year period, because there was a time where you were taught in your personal trainer course, oh, this is the strength rep range, and this is the hypertrophy rep range, and this is the muscular endurance rep range. And what we find for muscle growth is actually you can do your super low reps or you can do really high reps, but as long as you are training close enough to failures, as long as it's sufficiently stimulating, that hypertrophy is the same. So really this should be based on personal preference. And obviously some exercises are more suitable to certain rep ranges than others. I'm not going to be doing sets of 30 squats or deadlifts.
Me neither. So speaking of like very specific advice around exercise that's really questionable, Sims also promotes this very polarized cardio training model for women that I just find it quite bizarre. You're either supposed to be doing like high intensity, like sprint training, or very low intensity, like taking a friend and going for a walk. What is the sorry, it's just very hard for me to get it out because what is the basis? Like, what is the thinking that you're just going to leave out this whole section in the middle? Like that's not a good area for women to be working out. Like, is that a good model for women to be following?
Moderate cardio is bad for you if you're a woman.
Again, we have data here. It shows men and women adapt really similarly to different endurance training programs at different intensities. And so clearly, if you have endurance performance goals, you have to train at all of those intensities if you actually want to be any good. But if you're just looking for physical activity, then we need to tell people to do whatever they will do on a regular basis. And I really hate this message because it makes women afraid to go for a run. Yeah. Anything that discourages physical activity is a problematic message. It's one thing to say, for this goal, this is better than that. It's another thing to say, you should never do this.
It also seems like there's a fair amount of messaging, like it's not said overtly, but when I hear her interviewed, like on the Mel Robbins interview, and the whole thing was about how like, oh, women are doing it all wrong. And here's the reason why that stubborn belly fat won't go away, even though you're doing the same workout as your husband. It's because you're doing the wrong things. Mm-hmm. I have sort of two problems with that. One is I don't think that's accurate, but also it seems like there is a focus in her work on weight loss, fat loss, appearance, things like that. Like those are the only goals women should have. They don't seem to be performance-based goals, to your point, where it's like, well, let's say you wanted to run a marathon and you're like, but Stacy Sims told me only to do sprints or walking, right? So it doesn't seem like a lot of her advice is really based on any sort of performance goal as much as it's based on how to, lose some weight. Do you agree with that?
The messaging confuses me because sometimes when she's criticized, she'll come back and say, I work with highly active women. And so, my messaging is for only highly active women. But clearly it's not when you go and you say all women should do this or women are different because of this. And I mean, if she's trying to advise people appropriately on fat loss, she's doing a terrible job because she's saying calorie deficits don't work for women. And that, if you want visible abs, you should be doing compound exercises. Whereas, your husband should be in a calorie deficit and doing direct ab training. I mean, that's terrible advice. It's just a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. I always thought that was weird as well. Like, why are you saying women don't need to do any core exercises? Then they're just going to do their squats and their belly fat will magically disappear. I was like, what?
Right, I'm just like, you're going to stand up taller in your abs. So I'm like, I can stand up as tall as I want. Like, exactly. you need to lose body fat. Yeah. And if you want visible abs, you want growth in your abs, you need to train them directly. I mean, so it's just that one. It blows my mind because I truly don't know where that comes from.
Yeah. She in the Huberman Lab podcast, which I was tasked with listening to, she talked about how unfortunately, she really likes riding her gravel bike for long periods of time, and it's not ideal for her, but she does it for mental health. And so she's like, okay, all right, ladies, if you really need to do the long duration, low intensity or moderate intensity cardio for mental health, it's not ideal, but that's okay. But what you really should be doing is this polarized training of like sprints, or now you need to rest, just walk. And I found it so absurd.
Yeah.
But the way that it comes out, she sounds very credible. And like she knows what she's talking about. And I guess this isn't really a question. It's just me going like, how have we gotten here?
Yeah, I have a comment on that actually. I think that the way she communicates sounds very scientific and confusing, but she sounds confident and she's using big words, and so people will take her word for it. When in reality, it's one thing for me in the lab to have a discussion with a bunch of scientists about the particular molecular pathway or mechanism, and we know what we're talking about. But if I'm going out and speaking about practical exercise and nutrition recommendations, I need to explain them in a way that everybody understands, because even if human physiology is complex, exercise and nutrition recommendations are not. And so that to me is a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to be talking about the hypothalamus. Like,
Sorry.
we just don't.
Kiss peptin.
Yeah.
Like I can explain very simply why a calorie deficit works or why training in different rep ranges work. And let's have a conversation that people can actually understand the why behind the what, not confuse them with the why and then just say, take my word for it on the what.
We're going to switch topics a little bit here. Let's talk about bones. So,
if I can say one more thing about sprints.
Sure, please.
Yeah, yes, please.
I think that recommendation is really irresponsible, because if you are not a sprinter, you will have poor sprint mechanics.
Yeah.
And that is a recipe for disaster. And so
That's a really good point.
Please don't just start sprinting. You'll probably get hurt, and then you won't be able to exercise at all.
Yeah, it's like, maybe when you start strength training for the first time, don't start lifting heavy. Maybe when you start doing plyometrics, don't start doing 14-inch depth jumps. Yeah.
All right. So if we switch our focus now, and let's talk about bones, because there's a lot of concern about rapid bone loss at menopause. And Sims claimed in her interview on the Huberman Lab that women lose up to 1/3 of their bone mass during this time. I have actually never heard that before. So how accurate is that?
That's inaccurate. The thing about bone is, it seems like we achieve our peak bone mass probably in our 20s. And so then for the rest of your adulthood, you're just trying to maintain what you have, unlike muscle, where we can continue to grow. And it's true that around the menopause transition, so, kind of before and after, if you look at a maybe 10-year period, then you can see 1 to 1.5% per year of bone loss on average. So I can understand making the claim that it's 10% over the menopause transition, maybe. But also keep in mind that this isn't going to apply to everybody, because the peak bone mass you achieve is driven by genetics and your physical activity and nutrition during development. And then your ability to maintain that is also affected by those factors and can be compromised by certain factors, like having a very low BMI is one risk factor, smoking is another, excessive alcohol consumption is another. And so then the rate at which you start to lose bone density is also heavily influenced by genetics. So, and unfortunately, even if we kind of do everything to the best of our ability, sometimes you just got the short end of the stick, and a low bone density runs in your family, and you do end up having some issues with it. But regardless, the physical activity is super, super important as one of the modifiable factors.
Yeah.
What is your impression from current available research as to the most beneficial exercise methods for bone density and osteoporosis? Like, does it matter if we are lifting heavy, moderate, or light weights? Is impact training a necessity or just another way to increase bone mineral density?
Yeah, there's a recent network meta-analysis that tried to kind of compare all these different types of interventions, aerobic exercise, resistance training, jumping, walking. And they found that the most effective interventions were either aerobic training or resistance training or a combination of both. But the studies in bone are that you can criticize them because some of the interventions aren't long enough to actually see bone adaptations. When we think about muscle research, you can see something happen in 2 or 3 months. With bone, it's more 9 months as kind of a minimum. So I think we don't have a wealth of high quality data, but it does seem like challenging resistance training works. And so if you're somebody who's already lifting weights for the muscle benefits, then it seems like we're going to get bone benefits as well.
Okay.
There's an argument to not do so much like repetitive, like going on long runs, things like that for bone, because although it's this, you're getting that kind of repeated impact, but it's not high impact. And so if you're somebody who is osteopenic, then maybe that wouldn't be optimal. But that would be the opinion of kind of the bone people. But in some studies jumping seems to work, and in others it seems to not work very much. One thing that is important to distinguish is there's jumping like plyometrics, and then there's jumping with this sort of straight leg landing. And the research that shows that it's beneficial is jumping up to a pull-up bar and then dropping as sort of heavily as you can, trying to keep your legs straight. And that is probably more effective for bone than traditional plyometrics, because if you are landing in a squat, then the muscles and the connective tissue are absorbing a lot of that force. So it's not just bone. Yeah. I don't know that straight leg jumps are a very practical recommendation for women. So, I think we're at a point where I will say, lift weights because muscle benefits, of course. We want to grow and preserve muscle as we age. It also allows us to move through full ranges of motion and, balance ourselves under load. And that, in my mind, would contribute to reduced fall risk. And all of this talk about bone density is fracture risk, right? And if we don't fall, we don't fracture. And so if you are a stronger, I'll use the word functional individual, meaning you lift weights, you have muscle, you are capable of doing these exercises in different planes, and your muscles are strong, and therefore your connective tissue is strong, and that attaches to your bones, then I think we're setting ourselves up for a good outcome. But certainly you can make the argument that incorporating some balance training might be a good idea, or doing the jumps if you enjoy them, sure. And I don't think aerobic training is bad for bone. It really seems consistent physical activity is going to be beneficial.
Yeah. I've read in one of your debunk myth-busting posts, which I love, as well as I've heard from other scientists who you all seem to be kind of pushing back against Sim's claims, whether overtly or covertly, saying her name or not saying her name, but that the sets, when you're doing resistance training and say you're doing like high rep light load or moderate rep moderate load or heavy load low reps, that the sets need to be, quote, challenging. and this is just sort of something I'm personally curious about, but I think is super relevant to our conversation. Like, how do you define challenging in research? How do you measure it? How do you record data that, communicates how challenging the sets were for the people who were being studied? How do you know that a set has been taken to a point that's challenging enough to make a difference specifically to bone mineral density? Because I think I've heard that the sets need to be challenging if resistance training is going to contribute to increase in bone mineral density, given that the research is a little bit mixed and it's maybe not all as high quality as we need it to be. Basically, what does challenging mean?
So people will point to a study for bone where one group did 5x5 squats, deadlifts, and the other group did this at home exercise program with 2-pound weights or something. It's not surprising that the heavy weights were better for bone, but that doesn't actually tell us a comparison of doing lighter loads with a sufficient stimulus, right? And so, that all that tells us is that lifting heavy was better than doing an ineffective training program with mostly body weight. So when we think about what is challenging in a research setting, it's various definitions of failure. So you can either have failure meaning I physically can't do another one, or failure meaning I'm telling you I can't do another one.
I can't take the
yeah,
anymore.
And then if you're trying to, it depends on the exercise program, but there are some studies that will say, we want to stop the sets 1 or 2 repetitions shy of failure, which basically means you're there with the participant and you say, how many more do you have? Can you give me another one? And depending on whether they're stopping shy of failure or going to failure, you're coaching them through that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that in this case, if it's the reps in reserve, which you just described, the failure, is it defined as the official stopping point? Like, this is going to be muscular failure, absolute failure, or I've heard it called technical failure, as in like the point at which you maybe could do more, but your form would fall apart, or you maybe could do more, but it would cause undue psychological and physical suffering because of the fatigues, like perception. Is this something that's like they're always very clearly delineated in research? Like, what do we mean by failure? What does that mean? And then how close are we officially going to need to get to it for it to be stimulating?
So I think as a rule for those of us who are lifting or coaching others, then it should definitely be the last repetition that you can do with proper form.
Yeah.
But for research settings, it will depend on the exercise, right? Because if I'm just doing the machine leg extension and I go for another rep and I can't make it, I can't complete it, then it's not dangerous, right?
It's a machine. Yeah.
And so it's easier in that type of really controlled setting with that type of exercise to just kind of go for it anyway, and you don't have to worry about, oh, my form was compromised.
Right.
If I'm doing a barbell overhead press and I go for another one and tweak my shoulder, then that's going to be more of a problem. So that's why, just in general anyway, there are certain exercises that are not a big deal if you train to failure in in your everyday session, and then there are others that the risk is higher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our bone density course, Lift for Longevity, is your step-by-step guide to building strength and stability while bolstering your bones with barbell training.
And if you join the interest list now, you'll get exclusive free content, plus the biggest and only discount we offer when enrollment opens.
You might be wondering, am I doing the right kind of training to actually support my bone health?
What's the smartest way to keep my body strong without risking injury?
What's the best way to modify lifts if I have joint pain or past injuries?
How do I fit strength training into my busy life and make it a habit that sticks?
If you've ever had questions like these, Live for Longevity will give you the clear, science-backed answers you need.
But here's the thing, we only open enrollment twice a year. That's why the interest list is the best way to stay in the loop.
Sign up now to get expert insights, strength training tips, and first dibs on the best deal we offer.
Your bones will thank you.
Join the interest list now via the link in the show notes. All right, let's talk about cortisol for a moment, because this hormone is apparently responsible for everything that ever goes wrong. And let's talk about its relationship to intermittent fasting or fasted training. Sims promotes this growing narrative that women, particularly in midlife, respond poorly to intermittent fasting and fasted training due to hypothalamic sensitivity and increased cortisol. What does the evidence actually show about sex differences in metabolic and hormonal responses to intermittent fasting or to fasted exercise?
The truth is that fasting or prolonged fasting does increase cortisol, and that cortisol is higher in the morning, and that cortisol increases with exercise. But that's sort of where the truth part ends, because then that's turned into, and this is a problem,
Right.
which is not true. This is poor cortisol, right? Justice for cortisol.
Oh my God,
That would be an
Sarah,
amazing
t-shirt,
post.
t-shirt.
Yes. Justice for cortisol.
It's a really important hormone, and it does a lot more than just increase when we have physiological stressors. It helps with blood glucose regulation and blood pressure regulation. It helps with immune function, and it's really well controlled by the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenals, and these all work together to increase it when necessary and bring it back down when necessary. And that's true with many, 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 many hormones. That's just how they work. They are tightly controlled, and we don't need to interfere unless you're somebody who has an illness or health condition that's dysregulating those processes. And so, meaning it can't fluctuate by itself. And so, spike in glucose and insulin is another example. We eat, and we get that glucose spike, and then we have a release of insulin, and this all kind of self-resolves, unless you're diabetic, and in which case perhaps you need to intervene. But this is another example of kind of creating a problem out of nothing, because all of those things can be true about cortisol, that it's higher in the morning because it's supposed to be, and it increases with exercise because that's a physiological stressor, and it increases with prolonged fasting, again, because that's a perceived physiological stressor. But that's fine, because after the exercise, it's going to go back down. And when we eat, it's going to go back down. So then we get to the sex differences question, right? And we have data in women and men, either training fed or training fasted, and looking at performance outcomes and muscle growth and fat loss. And we're not seeing any differences. And so this is another issue that I have. When we talk about a hormone or one particular pathway, or we throw out things like nutrient sensitivity, people care about the outcome, right? People care about the muscle growth. People care about the fat loss. People care about the strength gains. People care about their performance goals. So we're kind of focusing on this intermediate step. But if it doesn't affect the outcome we care about, then we shouldn't be changing our recommendations.
Right.
When we do that, when we look at what happens acutely, and then we assume it's reflective of the long-term adaptations, we're often wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened with fasted training a decade, 15 years ago, where everyone said, well, you burn more fat during fasted training, and so that means you'll lose more fat, right? And all the bodybuilders started doing fasted cardio. Turns out, just because you oxidize more fat as fuel during that exercise session, it's not related to long-term fat loss. And so we need to be really careful about, again, kind of creating a problem and then saying, oh, it's going to interfere with the adaptation that people care about, when we don't have data to support that. And in some cases, like this case, we have data to refute that.
Yeah, you recently made a post that demystified this confusion that I think is super prevalent between using fat as fuel for performance versus fat loss. And you talked about how you can, like you just said, oxidize fat for fuel during running, for example, but that fat loss is more about energy balance, right? Which is about that calorie deficit. Is that accurate? Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
And I just found that your very concise meme was like cleared up a ton of confusion. I was like, thank you, Lauren. Okay.
Yeah.
So Sims also states that women need to eat early in the day to align with circadian rhythms and reduce increased stress, cortisol, right? I find this advice personally annoying because I typically don't eat for a good 3 to 4 hours after I wake up, but I wake up really early, but I find I have plenty of energy to accomplish what I need to at that time of day without eating, and I don't feel hungry. There might be a kernel of truth in this, as there often is. Is there evidence to suggest that skipping or delaying breakfast has more negative consequences for people? But I'll also just say for women rather than men, because that's typically how all of this advice is framed, is like women are not small men, and therefore this is advice for women.
What we do know is just there's so much inter-individual difference here that making a blanket statement like that doesn't make any sense. And really, it's probably true that it's better to try to eat around the same times on a day-to-day basis. So you'll know if you're somebody who consistently eats breakfast, you wake up and you're hungry. And if you're somebody who consistently does not eat breakfast, you don't wake up hungry. And that's because your system and your hunger hormones are responding to that continued behavior, and that it's becoming predictable for you. And you'll know when you try to change that it'll take a bit of adjusting before your hormones kind of follow. And really, this should just be based on preference. If you're somebody who likes to eat before you work out because you feel like it improves your performance, then that's great. If you're somebody who trains really early in the morning, or eating before a workout gives you GI discomfort, then skip the food. It's not going to interfere with your longer term adaptations, provided you are eating sufficient calories and protein for the rest of the day. And I think, unfortunately, this whole message is really getting warped to saying if you are doing some sort of intermittent fasting, time restricted feeding, or if you are training fasted, that then you are in a state of low energy availability.
Yeah.
But that assumes that you're, and then all of the kind of fear-based messaging around low energy availability is coupled with the messaging around fasted training. And it's true that low energy availability is a problem. It's something that should be avoided, and it's experienced by high-level female athletes who are exercising a ton and under fueling.
Yep.
And then you end up in this kind of cycle, and that can include menstrual cycle dysfunction and a host of other
Stress
health
fractures.
issues. Yes.
Female athlete triad.
Yeah.
But that's not what you get from a fasted training session.
Yeah. Is this another example of conflating the acute with the chronic?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and we have to remember that you can take a snapshot of right now. If I haven't eaten today, I'm not in a state of low energy availability just because I haven't eaten yet today.
Right.
I'm in a state of low energy availability if I am not fueling enough to support the extreme amount of exercise that I am performing on a chronic basis.
Yeah.
So not eating before your workout says nothing about your exercise or fueling for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it really is muddying the water here by bringing in low energy availability, but acting like the body just resets overnight and you have nothing in you. When in reality, I ate dinner last night, so I have stored glycogen. I could go to the gym and I will be fine.
Yeah.
We don't start every day on empty.
Yeah. It's like claiming it's a confusion, it seems like, of energy availability with what's actually in your stomach right now, as like what you just ate, that's your only available energy, right? As if you don't have stores all over your body.
Yeah.
Or as if digestion doesn't take a long time.
Right. Like people are like, I eat this half an hour before I go to the gym. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
You're probably not actually using that now at the gym.
Yeah,
right?
It's almost like it's like that classic conflation of like the body with a car. Like the car doesn't have gas in the tank and it's not gonna go. It's like that's not how it works with people.
Bodies. Yeah.
All right. So back to cortisol. Claims are often made that women in perimenopause have chronically elevated cortisol, and that this is causing all kinds of problems, including it's causing the loss of lean mass, or it's causing fat gain, especially visceral fat. What do we actually know about cortisol trends specifically for women across the lifespan? And are they different for perimenopausal women? How relevant, if they are, how relevant is any of this to exercise prescription?
Chronically elevated cortisol is a problem, but it's not a problem that the majority of the population are experiencing.
Thank you.
Good.
So if you have, and chronically low is a problem as well. And so chronically high Cushing's syndrome is an example of this. It's usually a function of an underlying health condition, or sometimes if you're taking higher dose steroid medications, and then, you kind of accidentally end up with this dysregulation. Addison's disease would be an example of the chronically low.
Okay.
And those are problems because what we talked about earlier, right? It needs to fluctuate and it knows when to increase and come back down. And so any of that is not good because cortisol is important and involved in so many physiological systems. It's true that if you have Cushing's syndrome, you can end up with some body fat redistribution. And that's where the cortisol face and the meno belly, cortisol belly, like that's where this comes from. It's not true that, everybody who is in the menopause transition is suddenly experiencing chronically high cortisol. This is a myth on the internet, and people are using it to say, hey, you gained weight. It's because of cortisol. Buy my supplements.
Yeah.
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 Okay. I just want to say, this is like so deeply satisfying, this conversation, because this is a lot, what you're saying is a lot of the stuff where Laurel and I were like, we look on the internet and we see people making these claims and we're like, that doesn't seem right. Like, I feel like they're using the research wrong, or they're making a mountain out of a molehill, or they're just clearly trying to sell you something you don't need. So thank you for coming on and making me feel good. But
cleaning up the mess.
Yeah, it's really useful. So another mess that's out there is this idea of cycle syncing, which, if the listener's not familiar, it's when you align your programming of your exercise with your menstrual cycle phases. You do certain exercises during certain phases and you avoid them during other phases. And most critics argue that the research base is too weak to support highly specific training recommendations like this. So what's your perspective on this method? Do you think it's necessary for active women to track their cycles as a guide to their training and even their nutrition? Is it helpful, or is this just another case of we're making things overcomplicated for women?
Yeah, this is a huge problem for two reasons. One, anytime you are just constantly switching things up, you're not working towards your goal. And so if you have muscle growth goals, you need to lift weights consistently, not just for 1 week per month. If you have running performance goals, you need to endurance train regularly, not just for 1 week per month. So clearly, this is just a terrible idea from a programming perspective that no coach who knows anything about exercise would endorse, right? Because clearly, if you're fundamentally changing the type of exercise you're doing multiple times during every single month, it's crazy. It makes no sense. Second, these programs sort of present themselves as your cycle is 28 days. You have these very equal quadrants, right? So day 1 to 7, you're going to do this. And then 7 to 14, you're going to do this. And it's because of these hormones and it'll make you feel this way. And then this hormone profile, and it's going to make you feel this way. And this is why we're giving you this program. Having measured hormones, tracked cycles, tracked ovulation in many, many women in over many, many cycles, I can tell you, I've only ever seen that pretty picture with the diagram that you find if you Google it on the internet once in one person ever. So many of us do not have a 28-day cycle. Some of us have 21 day or 35 day, and maybe it's not even the same from cycle to cycle. Furthermore, even if you do have a 28-day cycle, you might ovulate much earlier or much later than that middle day 14. And if you do, your hormone fluctuations are in no way matching this cookie cutter recommendation. So it just doesn't make sense because you need consistency if we want adaptation. And B, if you're doing one of these programs, I guarantee your hormones aren't even aligned with this diagram or, pretty picture you've been presented with.
Yeah. So Sims said in the Huberman Lab podcast that she thought that women should be tracking their cycles so that they can be more aware of fluctuations. I don't know that I've heard of her, and I'm not like a Stacy Sims expert by any means, but like I don't know that I've heard her promote programs specifically geared toward these different phases of the cycle, although I know there are a lot of people online that are. But she, in the Huberman Lab podcast, it was, again, classic Sims's very contradictory statements like, there's just not enough research on this, or all the research has been done on college-age women. And the real problem is that we don't know if women are ovulating. So I don't like the data out there on this. I don't think it's very strong. Therefore, it's too individual to say, but women really need to be tracking their cycles because these are the types of performance outcomes you're probably going to see. And I was just like, because the truth is, I don't know. I don't feel that I really do need to be tracking my cycle. Like if I don't get my period for a while, I'm going to be like, yo, doc, like what's up with me? Because I haven't got my period in a while. But like, I feel like I can just kind of pay attention day to day to how I'm feeling based on all the things going on in my life. But like, what do you think? Because I don't want to misrepresent Sim's stance on cycle syncing, but she does appear to think that it's very important that women track their cycles to be able to know why they're experiencing these performance outcomes in their training, and then also how to fuel. That was another part of her advice, was like, because now in this phase, you're going to know, like, you need to be eating more carbohydrates and like this and many grams more. And I'm like, I don't know how many carbs I'm eating any day of the day, like damn week, or half the time I don't even know when I'm going to get my period. So, and then 70% of women aren't exercising. It's like, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard the claims of estrogen is anabolic and progesterone is catabolic, and therefore you should change your protein intake as well. It's interesting because after she did that podcast and said, there's no high quality data in this, guess who published a high quality study on this? Yours truly. And no response at all.
Sure.
Nothing, no acknowledgement, because it doesn't support the narrative. It shows there's no difference. When you do track ovulation, and when you do take blood every single week, and when you do get in there and take a muscle biopsy, I mean, you can't do it more scientifically than I did it.
Yeah.
And comparing one woman to herself, because we did it in the high estrogen phase and the high progesterone phase, and compared, you to you in both phases. And so if there was a difference, we would have found it, and we did not.
Yeah.
I find that, I mean, the only reason you should be tracking your cycle is to know, oh, I'm going to get my period next week, and maybe go get some tampons.
Yeah, because I'm going on vacation, and I want to wear white pants or whatever.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's when I find it useful.
Yeah, or if you're actively attempting to get pregnant, it would be useful to know.
Yes, then too. Exactly. Yes.
It's interesting because I hear people say, like, I feel, during ovulation, insert whatever, or during my luteal phase, I blank. If it were so intuitive that you could just know when you're ovulating, we wouldn't have fertility issues. You wouldn't need to track ovulation. You don't feel yourself ovulating. You don't feel your progesterone increasing. You have your period, and that's sort of where it starts and ends.
The other thing too is, like, does knowing change what you're going to do? Should it change what you're going to do? I ran my first marathon a few days before I got my period. And the story goes that I should have maybe performed worse on my first marathon. And even if I had been running my 10th marathon, there's no way I would have known if the reason I ran worse on my 10th marathon was because I was about to get my period. So like, it's like, fine if it does make a difference. It's fine if, like, you do want to track. It's fine if you do notice that you feel different at different phases. But, like, what's going to probably influence what you decide to do day to day with exercise is how you generally feel based on a myriad of factors, right? Like, not just your period, but like everything else going on in your life. So
that's exactly the point. And the problem too is that it makes everything about your hormones. And so now we've just been reduced to a hormone profile, when there are so many reasons why I don't feel like going to the gym today, or my appetite is all over the place, or, I just don't feel very motivated, or I'm in a bad mood. And they might be because I didn't sleep well last night, or my husband pissed me off, or I haven't been consistent with my diet, or I'm just really stressed out about this thing at work. And then to make it all about, oh, it's because I'm in my follicular phase. Why? It ignores all of those other things that make us human. And so, I kind of feel the same thing about, we start tracking all these metrics of, I need this Aura ring to track my sleep. Why? I know if I slept poorly last night because I don't feel good.
Yes. Thank you. I got a Whoop for like a month, and I hated it because in the morning it would be like, you slept real bad. And I'd be like, I know. And then it would say, try not to do too much today. I'm like, that's not an option. Like, what? And it just stressed me out.
Yeah.
And it's also sometimes these recommendations make us question or second guess how we feel. And so it kind of takes the agency away from you. And you should be able to say, whether I do or don't feel my best today, I'm still going to go to the gym. Yep. Not every workout is an A+, and that's fine. Yeah. But I think, I hear that the subjective experience about how different cycle phases or being on your period affects performance, it is so all over the place. There are some people that say, oh, I PR all the time on the first day of my period. And other people say, oh, I have just such debilitating cramps. I would never go to the gym. And so putting any sort of label of expect to feel bad, expect to perform worse, that's harmful messaging, because the psychological implications of just telling you to plan to perform worse or feel worse, why are we doing that?
Right.
If we run into a situation where we don't feel very motivated or we have really bad symptoms, then let's respond if and when that happens. We don't need to, pre-plan for it.
Right. And also it might be having like a nocebo effect where it's like, you tell me I'm going to feel terrible, I'm going to perform badly, then I expect I'll feel terrible and perform badly.
Yeah.
And it might have nothing to do with your physiology.
Yeah.
And conversely, you might expect to perform well because of the phase you're in. And then you get to the gym and like, it's just not happening. And you're like, but I should be performing well. What's going on? I'm just going to force this one and like perform well, gal darn it. And, you might end up like overdoing it because you have this expectation of what's going to happen. And I find that that's usually a mistake with training, is to like expect something to happen, right? Should be responsive, I think, rather than predictive a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then you're led to believe that, you need special seeds during different cycle phases or something because, clearly your hormones are broken because you're not performing as well during that phase.
Special seeds?
Oh, you don't know about seed cycling?
No.
Well,
what's that?
Yeah. So seed cycling.
Wait, does this have to do with seed oils being bad? Or this is
these
something
are
else?
that during a certain phase you should be consuming flax seeds and then pumpkin seeds, and these are going to balance your hormones.
That's not. Is that a Stacy Sims claim?
No.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds a little wackadoodle.
I mean, I'm sure some listeners right now are like, I've heard that. Yeah. All right.
There is a large seed cycling community.
Okay.
Oh, well, I gotta go look that up. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Shall we rapid fire?
So it's like seed cycle, not soul cycle. Seed cycle. All right. Yeah. So how about rapid fire?
Yeah.
There's no. This is not a game show, and there are no rules. But the idea here is that you answer.
That's not true. There are rules. These are the rules.
You get a 5-word count minimum. Or maximum.
No. We have some rapid fire questions. We want, just, if possible, a pretty quick, short answer. Okay. Hopefully the questions will permit that. The first one is about creatine, because creatine is now being widely promoted for women, especially for muscle growth, but also for cognitive health and aging. Is there evidence that supports daily supplementation with creatine as being especially beneficial for women?
Not especially beneficial for women. If we think about getting that set of 10 and you can't get the 11th rep, maybe starting creatine daily helps you get that 11th rep. And that's sort of where the benefits start and stop. All the claims about cognition are pulling from data in diseased populations, people with traumatic brain injuries, people with Alzheimer's, people with clinical depression. And that's really interesting research. It doesn't mean it's a brain booster for everyone else.
That would be like maybe physiological plausibility, but mostly just speculative at this point.
Right. And when we think about supplementation in general, we are deficient in something, and so we're supplementing to bring it back up. And so if you're already at a baseline of this, then it doesn't mean that more is going to be better. And I think that's just we're missing that in the supplement conversation.
Yeah, that's that's a good one.
Really good point.
All right, weighted vests. Are they doing anything useful for women, or is it another piece of exercise equipment like ankle weights that will possibly go out of favor in a few years? What's your take on weighted vests?
If you are wearing a weighted vest to do squats or lunges, okay. If you are going for a walk, wearing the weighted vest and expecting it to be beneficial for muscle, bone, or fat loss, you've been lied to.
Okay. Weighted vests, basically weights you can wear.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're doing squats and lunges, you could also just hold like a barbell or a dumbbell and kind of get the same effect. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yes. And importantly, we talked about how progression over time is really important. So if you're wearing your vest and that is challenging now, then you're probably going to need a heavier vest.
So now you have a closet full of vests.
Right. And wearing it is only going to be effective for certain exercises. You might see people bench pressing wearing a weighted vest. I don't know what they're doing with that.
Not going to do much for your biceps. Yeah. Okay.
All right. this is a personal one, and I'm actually finally over it and understanding, but is the collagen that I'm putting in my coffee doing anything for me at all?
No, but I know you probably like the flavor and the texture because whenever I talk about collagen, people say, but it tastes good. So that's
Well, it's
fine.
not gonna, is it hurting?
No, I mean, your bank account maybe.
Yeah,
because it's a
exactly.
little overpriced.
Exactly. I know. I'm coming to terms with this, and I'm breaking up with collagen, but it's a tough one for me.
Okay. Is there any research linking perimenopausal hormonal shifts to increased musculoskeletal injury risk? Like, specifically, because we have claims about this from Sims, are there higher rates of plantar fasciitis and frozen shoulder amongst perimenopausal or postmenopausal women?
I don't know the answer to that linked specifically to menopause.
Okay.
And the frozen shoulder stuff is really outside my area, so I wouldn't be confident answering that question.
All right.
Spoken like a true scientist.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Once and for all, do we need 1 gram per pound of body weight protein intake?
If you like eating that much protein, that's fine. It's not harmful. But no, the benefits really come from when we go from the RDA, which everyone agrees is too low. That's 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight to about 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that bump does help. Importantly, the resistance training is the stimulus for muscle growth, and the protein intake is just going to optimize that. But really, anywhere in the kind of 1.2, 1.4, 1.6 grams per kilogram is sufficient. And anything above and beyond that, do it if you like it. Do it if it helps with satiety, if maybe you're on a fat loss diet. But otherwise, these claims are quite high, unnecessarily high.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to know. Okay. These are true or false questions, right? True or false? Women are not small men. It's a trick question.
It's true. But
Nope.
not relevant for any of the conversations we've had today.
Perfect.
True or false? Women need a different approach to training and exercise than men.
False.
Thank you.
True or false? If you don't eat within a half an hour of waking up, your body will start eating your muscles.
False.
True or false? Cortisol is the devil.
False. Again, justice for cortisol.
Justice for cortisol. True or false? Lifting heavy weights will help women discover that they don't need a man to carry things for them.
Sure, that's true.
True or false? Some women are large men.
I think we've established that could also be true. Again, maybe not relevant, but yeah.
True or false? Water will not hydrate you unless you add 1/16 teaspoon of salt to it.
This is totally false. I mean, if the only reason that you need to be adding to your water or concerned about electrolytes is if you are doing excessive amounts of exercise or exercising in the heat, things like that, and you're sweating a lot. But these are situations where you're losing body weight because you're sweating so much. Otherwise, just drink regular water. That also sounds kind of gross.
Yeah. Would you say that this is me like breaking the true or false rule and just asking a follow-up question. Would you say that suggesting to all women that they add 1/16 of salt to every glass of water they drink, would you call that irresponsible advice for any reason?
I would, because again, there's no reason for that. It's just another example of making things more complicated. And now we're making drinking water more complicated. I mean, what's left?
Is it also possibly true that many women get more than enough salt in their food?
100%. Like I said, this is only an issue if you're this is a small percent of people, and you will know if it's you because you are a high performance athlete who is losing a lot of body weight through sweat. And then you might need electrolytes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
All right. Thank you. So we wanted to do sort of a summary question. One of the things Laurel and I on this podcast, what we try to do when we talk about research and evidence, especially about women, is to make sure that we're not talking about it in a vacuum, that we bring in the historical and the social context that shapes women's experiences with exercise and with health advice. And Sims pushes back against fitness advice that has historically emphasized the aesthetic ideal of keeping women thin or small, right? Don't lift heavy, don't get bulky, you'll look like a man. And we see that as a positive shift, right? But she then replaces it with this very highly specific, often unevidenced rules about how women should train and eat. And in our opinion, we think that her message has resonated so strongly because, number one, it acknowledges that women have been told to focus on appearance at the expense of their health. Number two, it acknowledges that women have been left out of research historically. But also, number three, it offers something that powerfully appeals to the algorithm, right? The attention economy, which is this hyper-specific protocols aimed at people, both men and women. So, Huberman largely for men, and now Stacy Sims largely for women. Would you agree with this, that that's part of why she is so popular, is that this idea that you need to be so hyper-specific in everything you're doing for your fitness and nutrition is important, and it's very sellable on social media? And then here's the real question. Overall, do you think that her work has done more good than harm or more harm than good?
I think it resonates with people because it makes you feel seen. It's, this is for women. This is for me. Finally, someone's paying attention to me. And I understand that appeal. However, when you decide to target women in a way that sounds really authoritative and sounds really evidence-based, but truly isn't, then you're doing such a disservice. Because when you make exercise confusing and overly complicated, then you're not lowering the barrier to enter. And I think that's what we need right now. We need more people who are interested in prioritizing their health and prioritizing their fitness. And that means making recommendations that are effective and simple and sustainable and appropriate for that individual. So I think ultimately this does a lot of harm, because when you present yourself as a scientist but share information that isn't evidence-based, how can the community trust you?
Yeah.
It seems like she has done a really good job of appealing to emotion.
Yeah.
But she then uses that, like winning people over in that way, to then sell a lot of ideas and advice that, belie her credentials because she's not using evidence to do it. It's very confusing, and that's all I'll say about that.
And it sounds like she has some secret, right? Like she knows something that the rest of us don't, because who would say all of these things, if they didn't have, and that's the really, really unfortunate part that people need to remember. If these things were true, we would all be recommending them. We would all be
Right.
sharing them. They would be the standard parts of our messaging from the scientific community. When someone comes out and they're the only one saying it, and then of course you have people who parrot that message because they're consuming it from the source.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big red flag. Because what? Am I going to gatekeep the good advice for women? Of course not. If there was a difference, if you really shouldn't be doing fasted training or zone 2 or high rep resistance training, whatever it was, I would tell you because I want to be helpful.
Right.
But then that's the disappointing part is not only are you misleading people, but we're all here pointing it out. And you're continuing to double down on these messages and instead of engaging with the community. And it would be one thing to say, oh, I interpret this a little bit differently than you. Let's have a discussion about it and see where we disagree. And that's how we move forward as a scientific community. Discourse is key. Collaboration is key to what we do. When we have somebody like this who refuses to engage with the scientific community, but is so influential in the fitness space, we have a real problem because it's such an uphill battle for science now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert in science or marketing, but it seems from to my perspective that she plays very well by the rules of marketing, which is name the problem, name it very specifically. It's okay if it doesn't actually exist, but you have to tell the story and it has to be believable, and then sell the solution. And the solution has to be very specific to the problem, and the problem has to be very resonant with the audience that you're trying to capture.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the things that work, the boring basics, don't accomplish any of what you just said.
You're not going to differentiate yourself in the marketplace if those are your solutions. So then how are you going to have the competitive edge? Right?
Yeah.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your valuable insights with us, your expertise. Where can people find you? Because I'm sure they're going to want to.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Lauren CS1. If you're interested in long form research breakdowns, you can check out the Mass Research Review. And I co-host a podcast with my friend Eric Trexler called Front Page Fitness, where we talk shit about fitness headlines and we pepper in some education. And
listen, if you want good banter, check out Front Page Fitness. They have the banter on lock. It is very good.
Yeah. I am not lying when I say it's my absolute favorite podcast of the moment. And every time a new one pops up, I'm like, yes, they're going to talk shit about something and I can't wait.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank
Lauren.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was a very rich conversation. I feel that there are so many takeaways in there that are very clarifying and that I think go a long way toward cleaning up at least some of the mess online.
It was that was a very satisfying conversation. Whenever I get to talk to someone who also agrees that all this nonsense and jargon and supplements and selling and marketing and grifting is just total horseshit, I'm like, yes, we're not the only ones saying it. Other people out there also agree.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really enjoy about her presentation just generally is she is able to take these kind of complicated concepts and make it very easy for the layperson to understand, right? She's really good at distilling complex ideas into actual reasonable, actionable takeaways. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was like, it doesn't have to be so complicated, which is not the message we get a lot of the time for women.
Yeah. And we reached out to her ahead of time to ask her if she would be okay with speaking directly to claims made by Stacy Sims. In other words, we were like, we are going to name the source of these claims unless you are uncomfortable with that. Yeah. In which case we will just focus on the claims because I think that's should be based on the person's consent. And I would never want to put a professional in a bad situation on a podcast episode and start assuming that they're comfortable talking about another scientist or researcher without first checking in. And she was like, oh, I'm totally fine with that. I was like, yes. She's like, no problem.
Yeah.
I was in the DMs of another scientist who is pushing back in a similar way as Lauren is against Stacy Sims' claims. And he blurred out Stacy Sims' face in a clip. And I was like, okay, what is going on here? Because I find that these other scientists and professionals out there are kind of tiptoeing around the fact that it's coming from Sims. It's so clearly coming from Sims.
Yeah.
I just popped into his DM. I was like, is there a reason, why you're not just saying that it's Stacy Sims? I feel like it's maybe important to call out her brand and maybe call into question her brand so that people who maybe aren't as up on the science can at least identify that information coming from Stacy Sims is being called into question by other experts, by other scientists, and that might at least create some doubt, which would be good, right? And he said that actually he gets harassed in his DMs by her followers. I was like, well, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
And that sucks. And I was like, I completely understand why you would then be hesitant to call her out. But like Lauren's like, yeah, it's fine.
Well, I actually did the same thing. I asked another podcaster who did an episode where they were clearly talking about her work, but they did not name her. And I asked him the same thing because I was curious. I was like, is this something that's happening to everybody? And that person wrote back and said he felt his job was really to just question the data, but not get into calling out people. And I was like,
and I think
that's fair.
That's fine. It's a fine boundary. Yeah. Like, I think it's fair that everybody gets their own boundaries, right? Like,
absolutely. You're not supposed to do something just because if it's going to make you feel uncomfortable or evidently, get you some harassment in your DMs. I'm all here for the DM harassment. I think it's hilarious because it's just such like, it's sort of like when the Buff Bones followers got mad at us. I got a lot of DMs from that. And I'm like, you're so clearly like just ostrich head in the sand. Or like the Stu McGill stuff, right? Where his followers are known to be rabid. So I'm excited.
Yeah. I think that, doctors, scientists who are doing hard work, you got to choose what hill you're going to die on, what fish you're going to fry, insert whatever other analogy you want to. And if you don't have the personal energy to be dealing with the blowback, the personal blowback from calling out a person, attaching the claims to the person, right? The teachings to the teacher, then that's fine. But I also think that there is a lot of value when experts like doctors and scientists take a stand against other experts.
Absolutely.
And scientists and actually say their name, right? We think that what you're saying lacks scientific evidence, credibility. It calls into question what you're about and whether or not you're actually truly trying to help people. And we think that's wrong. And it's, I think, completely appropriate for a scientist and a doctor to take a moral stance, even though that might not be squarely within the realms of their field of study, which is science, right? Like it now starts to drift into ethics, but we're people at the end of the day. And this is information that's having a human cost. And therefore, if you are capable of taking that stance, I think it's helpful when someone like Dr. Colenso-Semple comes on a podcast and is like, look, what this person is saying is just not true. And it's, concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. We are going to be sharing yet another episode with you around Stacy Sims, the woman, the myth, the legend, the person who Sarah likes to call patient zero for so many of the thought viruses that are spreading rapidly. And we are calling this Make Stacy Sims Make Sense. We're going to be unpacking a lot of the information shared by Dr. Colenso-Semple in this episode and bringing in our strong opinions loosely held about our experiences listening to Sims. We might be sharing some direct quotes from her interviews so that you can hear her say it, and taking apart the psychosocial aspects of her claims in addition to the science.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
We have a lot of material for
do.
that episode now, which we have not recorded yet. So this has been our project, right? We've been working on these episodes 3 months in advance of their publication. So Sarah and I are deep down the rabbit holes of separating fact from fiction, learning a lot about female physiology, exercise physiology. It's fun. I love this.
Yeah,
I love this
me
shit.
too.
My husband's like, so how's it going? I'm like, I'm doing exactly what I should be doing with my life right now. He will have just seen me furiously commenting in a flame war on Instagram about some particular claim. And then he'll be like, so how's it going? I'm like, I am living my best life right now.
Yeah, we were talking in the intro about the whole idea of the Dharma talk. This is your Dharma talk path.
What is Dharma again? It's vocation. What is it?
Oh gosh. Yeah, Dharma is your path, I think.
My path. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, hang on. The eternal inherent... Oh, a cosmic law underlying right behavior and social order.
Well, I wouldn't go that far then.
That's just what Google AI said.
No. I get what you're saying. I love to disagree as a tool for learning. Or I like to take a stance that is potentially opposing in some manner in order to explore a topic. And I've grown up, we've talked about this, like I was raised in a house where we argued for fun. And
Right.
we adopted stances we didn't maybe truly completely agree in, but we would argue that side, kind of like a debate club, right? Like just in order to be able to take apart an argument and look at all of the sides of it and, you know, find ways to weaken it or strengthen it. And I think that's essentially what we do on these podcasts.
Definitely.
At least that's how it's kind of evolved. So it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun for me.
Yeah.
All
All right, folks. Well, this is we will see you next week.
All right. We will see you next week.